And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And last time we did a little revisiting back to the pandemic and some of the lessons and changes, and perhaps why we may have collectively engaged in that. And I think Serge and I were just having a little talk about a concept of we've talked on the show a lot about mindsets, and so, I was thinking about this idea of having an open mindset and how that opens up to see the meaning and the different synchronicities that we could create in life. And yeah, I thought that might be an interesting topic. We'll see if Kris wants to run with that or has something else planned. And hi, Serge.
Hey, Don. How are you?
Oh, just lovely.
California peachy, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Just I'm enjoying a couple days off, so it's let's us tape a mid-afternoon show. Usually we're in the evening.
It's never been done before. Oh my God. Yeah, that sounds like a
We're
good
real
idea.
trailblazers.
Yeah, I know.
We're going wild.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just see where Kris wants to go with that. Um, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Now we trust that you are comfortable.
Yes, Kris, very comfortable.
Indeed. And we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for yours as well.
As far as a topic of discussion, and perhaps we can venture into fulfillment and especially fulfillment mindset. Now, there's all manner of thinking. There's positive thinking, and in your terms, there is negative thinking. There's prosperity thinking. There is scarcity thinking, and so on and so forth. But overall, the innate mindset of the individual, meaning the self, the soul, is fulfillment. It is always driven towards the best possible ventures for fulfillment. Sometimes that may include a situation, according to your terms, going awry, so that you can make adjustments, course corrections, rethink your approaches. And case in point, the global pandemic with COVID. So it seems, on the one hand, this is an absurd admission that people lost their lives, people's lives have been changed, and it upset the economy and so many other repercussions. And to think of this as somehow or other being tied to fulfillment, perhaps quite bizarre. But this is our approach, and it ties in with your human approach to life. It is often a tendency to just want to barge ahead, move forward, and in the process, actually forget your original intention, actually forget your own self, to become very preoccupied with some kind of a goal, as if attaining that goal is the epitome of success. While success has nothing to do with reaching an epitome of some kind of goal, but rather with the experiences along the journey. And we want to clearly express that we are not saying that, of course, you need a pandemic or global catastrophes. When you continuously ignore your own best interest, your own self, will try to find whatever means possible to bring you back on a specific course. And it has nothing to do with what you may consciously think is what you want or need. Because your own conscious decisions along that path is not necessarily clearly thought out. When you rush forward, in fact, you run without any brakes, you are bound to recognize that you have somehow or other set conditions into motion that can lead you where you don't want to, if you pay attention, if you notice things. And very often, you might yourself or other people might notice that something is amiss. Not everything is adding up anymore. The engines are not firing properly, if you like. Something is off with the timing. Things start to crumble. You're noticing cracks in your carefully laid out plans. And this is where we are presenting this, is in order to be able to pay attention. And we also do not mean that simply because you pay attention, your whole life is going to be a bed of roses. There will always be challenges. But the point is, how do you handle the challenges? And more specifically, how do you manage yourself? Because it always comes down to self. How do you manage yourself in the light of various challenges? So globally, you had this pandemic, and it is not over. There are still not just small pockets, but in different areas, large segments of the population which are still affected due to some variants of the virus. Now, why would this still be present almost 3 years into the process? Mainly because individuals, whether singularly or in large groups or nations, are still not cognizant of the source of viruses. And it has nothing to do with monkeys or birds or other creatures. It has to do with a specific state of mind or mindset. And it is usually the result of either poverty, scarcity, victimhood mindsets. And this is often propagated by the very institutions who claim to be able to, how do we say, save you from certain conditions. Individuals are generally not, on the one hand, encouraged to be their very best authentic selves. And at the same time, they are encouraged to be their very best authentic selves. And when the two meet and clash, the individual feels a state of disempowerment and self-disapproval. And this exacerbates the situation because the individual feels that somehow or other they are caught in a situation they cannot escape, without realizing that they do have the means to resolve the situation. But it has to do with examination of mindset. What kind of attitude, what kind of perception is involved? And when we use the term perception, it has to do directly with the manner in which there is a focus of attention, sometimes so intensely that nothing else can penetrate and capture the attention of the individual or the groups to help move them away from what captures their attention. So COVID and other epidemics have always related to or been related to situations on a large scale of people who are unfulfilled, dissatisfied, and disempowered as a means to try and transform, bring you back to a state of empowerment, of fulfillment, of self-approval. It is a little bit of a complex issue, and we're trying to make it as simple as possible. So please bear with us so that everything works out very nicely in the end. Do you follow?
Yeah, and I have to imagine that trying to explain it on a mass scale, we're dealing with billions of combined value fulfillment opportunities and how they come together in this event.
Indeed. And of course, it is always centered around the one individual. And at the same time, because you live in a consensus experience, then everyone can pitch in or not. So when there is an ever increasing group of people who are aligning with, say, states of disempowerment and self-disapproval, it makes it more difficult to snap out of the situation. And at the same time, there begins a groundswell of powerful emotions, usually the kind that have been denied and suppressed for a very long time. Because human beings like to consider themselves to be quite tolerant. And then all of a sudden, they are not. And it has nothing to do with being tolerant of other people. It has to do with being tolerant of themselves, to be able to see things clearly and not necessarily in conscious terms, but to be able to examine the underbelly of the beast, if you like. So here we are talking about the underbelly of dissatisfaction and disempowerment of millions and millions of people who want situations to change but feel disempowered in actualizing the change itself. And in this way, the emotional and psychic tsunamis begin to build up steam. So you have larger and larger segments of the population. And it may start with little pockets here and there, but then there's larger segments of the population who recognize that something is amiss. We're not talking about little groups of people who want to take over entire governments or populations. We're talking about what creates that in the first place. And that is dissatisfaction. It is recognizing that there is a level of management, if you like, whether it comes from politicians or otherwise, it is still personal with their own lives. And there are issues that they feel unable to come to terms with. Because this is not something that you are taught in any form of school. It is not part of the academic curriculum. So this makes it even more difficult when it seems that everything happens to you instead of everything happens for you. So if you flipped the script, if you like, instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Why am I suffering like this? Ask yourself, why is this happening for me? What am I trying to grasp or understand concerning my own self and my experiences in my life? And where is the empowerment in the situation? And the answer may not appear instantaneously, but if you ask and are open to receiving the communications or the answers, the insights, they will come. And because this is occurring on a larger scale, there is a bit more work involved. Everything is not all parades and balloons. Well, sometimes it is. Thus, exploring the notion of personal fulfillment can begin to change the tide. It can reverse it. But everyone has to do his or her part and not depend on another one to be able to resolve the situation. Because there is no quote unquote savior in that sense of the word. You have to do your own saving. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I know in my own journey, uh, that it kind of had me face the idea that I reality was being created outside of myself, and therefore, I could be the victim of, random circumstance or sinister circumstance that was originating from outside of my own being, and therefore kind of its victim. And that was, I do believe, through working with you and the different avenues, I did ask myself that question, and that's what I've come to understand, that and I gave me the opportunity to face that fear and understand that fear, and I think move largely beyond it.
Indeed, thus it requires being able to visit what Carl Jung and others refer to as your shadow self. Those parts of yourself you find so unsavory, you must bury it, usually in your own self.
Yeah.
Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So these are all related to specific emotions. And when they are not addressed, but buried instead, suppressed and denied, the energy never goes away. It slowly seeps into certain bodily aspects, perhaps organs, joints. There is a sense of inflammation, irritation. Sometimes diseases begin, as opposed to the usual medical clinical model that diseases and illnesses are always the result of external conditions. Do you follow?
Yeah, I follow. That makes sense.
So again, a journey into the so-called shadows of your own self can bring huge rewards. And you will find that those often suspected unsavory aspects of the self are nothing of the sort at all, because that is the result of your own perception. And they are usually the result of wanting to be accepted and appreciated by others. Therefore, if they find a certain aspect of your persona to be less than their liking, you are likely to begin to literally cut your own authentic self to little pieces so that you find what you think would be appreciated by others. And the rest, unappreciated selves, can be put away in these little dark rooms of your own psyche. So you psychologically, slowly dismember yourself in order to appear authentic. But your authentic self is the one who suffers. And that kind of suffering is what builds enough psychic and psychological atmospheres to create storms in your physical world. And by storms, we mean whether it is a pandemic, an epidemic, natural disasters of one kind or another, in an order to provide you with the recognition that this energy is yours. It has not been sent by some supreme being to punish you. Such a supreme being is unworthy of such a title. If you have a question or a comment, please feel free.
Well, Chris, I think actually we're getting close to the break point for an episode. So, any final thoughts on that? That's been intriguing.
Not at the moment, but we do recognize this is a little heavier, quote unquote, than the subject we have discussed before. And it is meant to give additional food for thought, but this time, a very large buffet of food for thought.
Yeah, I agree. I felt that too. And yeah, well, hopefully some of the viewers can digest that. I know I will be.
Indeed. And perhaps in the next taping, we will lighten the mood a little bit and offer advice of some kind to help you see through what you have done. Indeed, then, we thank you for your consideration.
Thanks as well. See you on the next episode.